Hi, I'm Che. I'm currently in Los Angeles. I'm an actor and a writer and a filmmaker in Los Angeles, and it's raining, which is pretty awesome for us. I first was introduced to Lannette through my friend Samantha. I hadn't talked to Sam in I think maybe like 6 or 7 years, and she called me and was like, Che, I met this filmmaker, I met this amazing woman. You have to get in touch with her. I have to connect you two because I've been working in film for a long time. And I said, sure. I'm always open to talking to artists and collaborators. And at this juncture in my career, it particularly excites me to work with female filmmakers because it's a wonderful time for us to get our stories told. And I feel like for the first time in a long time, there's traction and we're actually being prioritized, not necessarily by the powers that have always been, but by our newfound empowerment and the necessity for art that speaks outside of the canon. So I touched base with Lannette, and it was a very interesting experience. I should note that I'm from New York City, so I am innately, let's not say innately, I was very much so raised to be skeptical of everything and anything. Trust was earned over a long period of time, and I think you can talk to anybody who's been making films that so much of this process and so much of this venture lies in continuously working with people who you trust. Not only to have people who stand by your vision, but to also trust them enough to elevate your vision. And I think what was interesting about Lannette is that she came forth at this project prioritizing connectivity. So the first time we spoke, she actually, instead of asking me what's my resume, where have I been, what films have I been a part of, what television have I been a part of, all the bullet points you often get asked in a average interview for a position on a film or television set. And she suggested that we start by doing a meditation. I will be completely honest, I was skeptical. I was skeptical, but I was also totally open because I've worked on projects where the element of connectivity has fallen to the wayside, and production momentum and the stress of it has really overtaken it, that the creativity and the space to invite something bigger into that process is no longer a priority, and sometimes you lose the joy of it and you forget why you started it. And so I did this meditation with Lannette. It was about an hour, and I was like, why not? I've done everything else. I'll surrender to this process. And it was really soothing, and it was really healing. And she asked me if anything came to me during it, and I kept getting like visions of like a railroad and the tracks there. And I don't know if that's because one of my skill sets is about keeping a vision on track. I think it's easy to get lost, but I really enjoy honoring the track and honoring the place that we need to go, and understanding that there's curves in it. And sometimes you end up somewhere completely different than you thought you were going, and sometimes that's a sign of the magic that's entered. Sometimes it's a sign of fear, and sometimes it's just a learning process. So we did this meditation, and we talked for hours about her son and the different experiences she's had and the different places where she has talk to people literally globally about this project based on an experience where that, really began in tragedy and turmoil, but was a huge moment of clarity, and in which she had a spiritual experience that she woke up and said, this is a story I have to tell. And I think that is one of the most exciting places to be as an artist, where your desire, the mandate for expression gives you the motivation to see anything through. And what I loved about talking with Lannette is that she kept talking about the love. How is this made from a place of love? Because that is ultimately the story. And I think in anything, almost, or the finest pieces of art, in my opinion, obviously, are propelled in some form by love or fear. And often the fear is rooted in a love. It just kind of comes out sideways. So I think it's going to be super challenging, as most great things are. And I think a lot of the times it's hard to talk about more spiritual aspects of life in film, because it gets confused with religion, or preachiness, or sometimes even propaganda. And we know we have a historical use of pressing systemic beliefs onto people, specifically in world film, as well as in the United States, that they didn't ask for. And so to let the story lead and have the messages derived independently, and also giving the viewer the space to have their own experiences and not have to take away whatever lessons were specifically the protagonists, but to see it clearly. And I think essentially, beyond the excitement and the awesome collaborators and the momentum for this project, which values, higher frequency, and is something that Lannette insists upon in a non-forceful way. And, higher frequency, I don't think is reserved for the more spiritual, or, people who are more in tune with things. I think it is a underlying force that sometimes we are more in connection with, and sometimes we are less in connection with. I'm excited to see how the whole thing pans out, to lead from a spiritual place, but also leave room for mistakes for humanity, which is, and humanness, and distractions, and, bumping against each other, but embracing that instead of deciding that's a problem is going to be really a revelatory process in a lot of ways, or at least for me, where there's a very clear, systematic way to do things, which also can be very beneficial, but to marry that is an adventure in itself. And I think art almost always has something in it that wants to heal, or something that needs to be said to heal the maker. So I don't know where that will take place. Maybe in the finished project, maybe through the project. Maybe people will meet on set that, we're always supposed to meet and never did. So I'm excited for the ride. I think there's going to be a lot of magic in there, and the final product will speak for itself. And we don't know really what that's going to be. We know what we think it's going to be. But if we leave air in the room for magic, in the room for something bigger to come into that process, I'm super excited to see where those train tracks lead.